spacecraft called New Horizons set off on a mission to Pluto. Now, it's about to arrive. Right now, the New Horizons spacecraft is about to rendezvous with a planet no bigger than Alaska, just 1,400 miles across. The most ambitious space shot ever. Pluto has always had the power to inspire. From Walt Disney back in the 30s, to an outraged public in the noughties. But the truth is, Pluto is a place we know so little about.
The big unanswered question about Pluto is, what does it even look like?
With inside access to the New Horizons team, this is Pluto like you've never seen it before. 9.5 years in space, and it all comes down to one intense, nerve-wracking day. It's showtime. Humans are movers. We're a relentlessly restless species. Natural migrants, wanderers, adventurers, explorers. Always have been. We have this insatiable restlessness. In the space of a few 100,000 years, we left Africa, crossed oceans, reached every part of our world. And now we go to other worlds. We've been to Mars, Jupiter, and Mercury. We've seen Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, and Venus. And Pluto is so much more than the name of a cartoon dog. It's the last unexplored world of the solar system. A potential gold mine of discovery. Perhaps the key to understanding the origins of our own planet. And right now, NASA spacecraft New Horizons is about to open up that world to us for the first time.
Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god.
New Horizons has even made it to the world's favorite geek show.
I'm worried about the New Horizons space probe.
We get to see him flip out because he's worried it was demolished by space ice.
Space ice is no joke. Can't even watch Frozen anymore.
He had to go to Pluto. Sounds easy. Just go, right? Like from here to there. But going to Pluto meant reaching further than we've ever attempted before. Over 3.5 billion miles away, 25 times further than Mars. And yet finally, after 9.5 years in space, New Horizons has Pluto in its sights. This is now the most dangerous phase of the mission, where a single grain of dust could take out the spacecraft. If you've seen me on shows like Brain Games, that just completely short circuits your brain, you'll know how much I get fired up by the wonders of the universe and how the power of technology can reveal them. Well, this is one of those moments in history when all of those things come together in a single, exhilarating adventure. If the New Horizons mission is successful, it will be the climax of a story that goes back 85 years. In 1930, American astronomer Clyde Tombaugh took 2 photographs through a telescope, 6 days apart, of the night sky. One of the dots moved. It had to be a planet. It was named Pluto by a little girl in England after the Roman god of the underworld. Her grandfather was at Oxford, then he passed on her suggestion to friends in the States. And then movie mogul of the moment, Walt Disney, picked up on America's newfound planetary star and named his cartoon dog Pluto.
Hello, how would you like some delicious hot bacon grease?
Not the other way around, as a lot of people like me used to assume. The public's love for the dog went on for decades, while poor little Pluto the planet got sidelined. Until Alan Stern came along.
You know, I grew up in the go-go time of space exploration. I was a little bitty boy during the Apollo program. The technology of it, the scientific discoveries, and frankly the romance of the exploration just swept me off my feet. I got into the building model rockets that fly, and had a lot of fun with that for years.
Alan watched the missions unfold year after year, planet after planet.
Things were evolving so rapidly, I didn't even know if I could get through school in time to be a part of any of it before we would explore the whole solar system.
He needn't have worried. There was still Pluto, the planet no one thought worth the mission because it was so small and so far away. But in Alan's mind, they were saving the best for last.
Pluto is something that packs more scientific punch, I believe, than any other planet in the solar system.
And finally, the kid who dreamed of joining the space race landed his dream job.
New Horizons is the capstone to that era of exploration. It is, in a real sense, the last train to Clarksville, the last picture show. I don't think I would have believed it, that I would be lucky enough to be in that position. But standing here today for 15 years to pull this off, it's a wonderful feeling for us.
Alan will soon discover if his life's work has been worth the wait. After 9.5 years in space, New Horizons' mission to Pluto comes down to an encounter lasting less than 2 hours. Controlled by a team here on Earth, over 3 billion miles away. Pluto, 3.6 billion miles away. Mind-bogglingly far. How do you begin to get your head around that kind of distance? Okay, so let's shrink the solar system down to the size of the US. And imagine New York is the center. Most New Yorkers already think that anyway. Here's the sun, sitting on Manhattan. At that scale, the first planet, Mercury, would be at Staten Island. Venus is down the New Jersey Turnpike, and the Earth would be around Trenton. To get to Pluto, New Horizons has had to cross the orbits of all the other planets. Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. And Pluto is right on the other side of the country, in LA, 40 times further from the sun than the Earth is. That's only some of the time. And that's because of the weird shape of Pluto's orbit. See, if the sun is here and the Earth is here, Pluto's orbit is kind of like that, right? It puts Pluto 3 billion miles away at its closest, but 5 billion miles at its farthest. This elliptical orbit makes a big difference. Pluto was at its closest point to us in 1989, and since then it's been getting further away. 2015 is our final opportunity in a lifetime to visit this last unexplored world. An opportunity not to be missed. The New Horizons mission was greenlit in 2001. Gave them 14 years from greenlight to encounter with Pluto. Sounds like plenty of time. Not in the space business.
We had to launch New Horizons in one 3-week launch window, barely 4 years after winning the project.
4 years to build a spacecraft that normally takes up to 10 required some creative solutions.
We had a very short time to develop the spacecraft, so a lot of the design had to be based on technology that was available. You don't want to be reinventing the wheel.
The spacecraft had to meet exacting standards. Above all, it had to be light. So Chris and his team designed a lightweight triangular frame.
We cut the corners off of the spacecraft in order to reduce the mass. We chose to avoid mechanisms because mechanisms have a tendency to fail.
It needed a reliable source of power. So what about solar energy? Pluto is so far from the sun that they get about 1,000 times less light than we get here on Earth. To put that into perspective, when I put on a pair of sunglasses, I reduce sunlight by a fraction. To reduce sunlight to the level you'd have on Pluto, you'd have to put on 10 pairs of sunglasses. No way you could power a spacecraft with that. So, New Horizons relies on a plutonium-powered generator, which brings its own problems.
The power supply gives off some radiation that could be bad for the electronics.
So they had to keep the power supply really low.
So this little power source, well, it produces about 200 watts of power at Pluto.
So what does that mean, only 200 watts? Enough to power a fridge? Nope. Coffee machine? Not a chance. Right now, New Horizons is speeding through space, running on just enough power to run a couple of these light bulbs. The spacecraft doesn't even have enough power to run an electric motor to point its radio antenna at Earth. Instead, they have to rotate the entire spacecraft to communicate with home. So to point its cameras and instruments at Pluto will mean pointing the whole spacecraft away from Earth, cutting off all contact with mission control.
You actually have to turn the spacecraft to take measurements at Pluto.
New Horizons will be on its own during encounter. If the flyby hits a problem, the team won't know until it's too late. New Horizons is closing in on Pluto. A one-shot attempt to gather as much data as possible of this unexplored world.
After 9.5 years of hurtling through space, we're approaching Pluto at 32,000 miles per hour, and we're concentrating to get our highest resolution images and spectra of the surface.
With less than 100 days to go to closest approach, New Horizons has returned these new images. The best ever so far. But these pale in comparison with what they hope to get when they arrive. Its 7 instruments will probe Pluto's features, including its polar caps, atmosphere, and its weather. Unlocking these secrets may help us understand the processes Earth went through in its infancy. A process that ultimately ended with you and me. Gathering all this data isn't straightforward. There isn't enough power to run all the instruments at once. The team must program a flyby science sequence which tells New Horizons which instrument to turn on and when, and beam it to the spacecraft in advance. Even traveling at light speed, it takes 4.5 hours for the signal to get there, plus several days for New Horizons to process it.
We have to tell the spacecraft what to do days in advance. We can't change New Horizons' plans over a week before the encounter.
With the flyby science sequence locked, the climax of this mission comes down to timing. Predicting the exact second New Horizons will fly past tiny Pluto. Scientist Mark Buey shows just how difficult this is.
This car is New Horizons. Down in the distance, you can see another car, that's Pluto. And the whole idea is that we want to take a picture when we're absolutely as close as possible.
There's nothing on board the spacecraft that says, I'm seeing something. We sort of take the images in the blind.
You can say, all right, spacecraft, turn, and hope Pluto's in the frame. If you've got the right timing, it will be there. If you don't have the right timing, it's not going to be there.
Mark closes his eyes and hopes for the best.
It's 3, 2, 1. And did we get it? I missed it.
The only way to predict where Pluto will be at encounter is to know Pluto's orbit precisely. But incredibly, when New Horizons left Earth 9.5 years ago, the team lacked that critical information. And here's why. It takes Pluto 248 years to go around the sun once. That's like in the whole history of the United States. It's never been in the same place twice. Since its discovery, Pluto has only traveled 1/3 of its orbit. And most of that data isn't very accurate.
This represents the sky. The older data from 1930 to 1950 was less accurate. 1990, this is where we started taking really good data. What that means is that you could draw another curve through here, say, that might have a path that looks a little bit like this. Each one of these lines here represents a different orbit.
Each orbit put Pluto in a different position at encounter. Each one around 62,000 miles apart. As late as 2012, 2/3 into the mission, there is a chance New Horizons could miss Pluto completely.
After all that time planning, building the spacecraft, flying all the way across the solar system to take pictures of empty sky.
Mark knows he has to find a solution, and fast. New Horizons has been in space 9.5 years. They think they'll hit their target, but there's no guarantee they'll succeed. That's because in 2012, with New Horizons speeding through space at almost 1 million miles a day, Mark Buie realizes he doesn't know exactly where Pluto will be at encounter.
I just finally got to the point where in a science team meeting I stood up and said, this is a problem.
With the entire mission in jeopardy, Mark visits the Lowell Observatory, where Tombaugh first discovered Pluto. And incredibly, he stumbles upon a stockpile of telescope images of the night sky around Pluto, taken by astronomer Carl Lamplund, photographed between 1930 and the early 50s.
Here on the left, we've got one of the 2 plates that Tombaugh used to actually discover Pluto. That's not enough to pin down the orbit. Then comes the Lamplund plates, zooming in, higher magnification, higher precision, but more importantly, over 20 years of time, with nearly 1,000 measurements. Who knows what he was trying to do, but clearly measuring the position of Pluto was one of those things.
Processing nearly 1,000 of Lamplund's images, Mark creates the first ever movie of Pluto's orbit. Just visible is a tiny, faint dot moving to the right of the bright star. Yep, that little tiny dot is Pluto. Incredibly, by tracking the dot precisely, Mark's team can steer New Horizons towards it to within 8,000 miles of its surface. He can now also predict exactly where Pluto will be on July 14th, 2015, at the moment of encounter.
I think this is just such an amazing story. What the data that Carl Lamplund took has been phenomenally important for the mission.
With New Horizons on track, the mission suffers an unexpected blow. The world's most elusive planet suddenly becomes the world's most contentious.
And finally, it is official now, Pluto is no longer a planet. The International Astronomical Union voted it out of their planet business today.
I talked with a student just last week who thought that this meant that Pluto was kicked out of the solar system and been ejected.
It was too small?
Once a planet, always a planet.
Of course it's not. It's still in its orbit going the way it was before. It's just been reclassified.
The word planet is strictly defined to be a body rounded by...
In fact, Pluto had been officially demoted by the International Astronomical Union.
Those in favor of Resolution 1. Those opposed?
The public was outraged. School kids inundated TV scientist Neil deGrasse Tyson with protest letters. Dear Mr. Tyson, why do you think Pluto is no longer a planet? Do not like your answer. You are going to have to take all of the books away and change them. It's from Emerson, aged 9. In America's most popular television show, The Big Bang Theory, the writers tapped into this rich vein of popular discontent.
Hayden Planetarium in New York. I'm quite familiar with Dr. Tyson. He's responsible for the demotion of Pluto from planetary status. I liked Pluto. Ergo, I do not like you.
But I actually didn't demote Pluto. That was a vote of the International Astronomical Union.
If ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. Think about that, Dr. Tyson.
So what's the problem with Pluto? Why isn't it a planet? What exactly is a planet? It's gotta be round, right?
The body needs to be round because of its size or its self-gravity.
Big enough to pull itself together, have enough gravity, have enough mass to make it round. Otherwise, it really is just a chunk.
Makes sense.
presumably goes around the sun, right?
A planet is an object that orbits the sun.
Got it. Anything else?
There's primary planets, so the Earth, and Jupiter, and Pluto. Then there are secondary planets. The Moon is a secondary planet because it orbits the primary planet. And you could have tertiary planets, terrestrial planets, gas planets, icy planets.
Stop. All right, guys. Most of the scientists seem to think Pluto's a planet. So what's up? It seems it wasn't Pluto itself that was the problem, but that Pluto was no longer alone. Astronomers had found another tiny object out near Pluto. Then others, and yet more. Over 1,000 planet-like objects, some as big as Pluto. They called this new region the Kuiper Belt. A massive constellation of space rocks and ice orbiting the sun. See, when they discovered the Kuiper Belt, there were potentially thousands of new Pluto-sized planets. And they'd all need names.
The reaction was, well, we can't have too many planets because schoolchildren will never remember the names of them. Really? I thought to myself, do we have to limit the number of stars while we're at it?
It would be disastrous for astronomy if we come away from the General Assembly with nothing. We will be regarded as complete idiots.
They decided to call the biggest objects in this Kuiper Belt dwarf planets, and that included Pluto. So now we have Pluto and the 7,000 dwarfs. The thing about planets is that it's not their size that matters, but what they can tell us about our origins. And the Kuiper Belt discovery only made New Horizons